The crisp air of the Redwood National Forest filled Sarah Miller's lungs as she stepped out of her dusty Jeep. Towering redwoods, their reddish bark glowing in the afternoon sun, stretched towards the sky like ancient guardians. A sense of awe, mixed with a touch of isolation, washed over her. This was her new home, her new beginning. After years of moving from one ranger station to another, she finally felt a sense of permanence, however remote. Her father, also a ranger, had always spoken fondly of these woods, a bittersweet memory now that he was gone. The loss still lingered, a dull ache in her heart. As she unloaded her gear, a faint sound drifted through the trees, a soft, almost muffled cry. She paused, listening intently, but the sound was gone as quickly as it had come. Dismissing it as the wind whistling through the branches, she hoisted her backpack and headed towards the small, rustic cabin that would be her new residence. The woods, however, seemed to hold their breath, a silent observer to her arrival. The cabin, though simple, offered a welcome respite from the long drive. Sarah unpacked, arranging her few belongings and trying to make the space feel like home. While sorting through a stack of old local newspapers left behind by the previous ranger, a headline caught her eye: "Local boy missing after family picnic." The article, dated 1958, detailed the disappearance of a 5-year-old boy named Ethan during a family outing in the very forest she now patrolled. A grainy black-and-white photograph accompanied the story, showing a smiling boy with wide eyes and a slightly tousled haircut. A chill ran down Sarah's spine. The boy's face, though faded by time, held a haunting innocence. She couldn't shake the image, a disquieting feeling settling in her stomach. The faint cry she'd heard earlier resurfaced in her memory, no longer easily dismissed. The newspaper article lay on the small wooden table, Ethan's smiling face staring up at Sarah. The setting sun cast long shadows across the cabin, deepening the sense of unease. Later that evening, as she conducted a routine patrol along one of the forest trails, the wind picked up, rustling the leaves of the towering redwoods. The air grew noticeably colder. Suddenly, the faint cry she had heard upon her arrival returned, this time much closer. Her heart pounded in her chest. She stopped, scanning the dense undergrowth. Then, between two massive trees, she saw it. A small, fleeting figure, barely illuminated by the moonlight filtering through the canopy. It looked like a child, small and frail, standing motionless for a brief moment before vanishing into the darkness. Sarah gasped, her breath catching in her throat. The image was so vivid, so real. She felt a shiver, not just from the cold, but from a deep, primal fear. It was no longer the wind. Sleep offered little respite that night. Sarah tossed and turned. The image of the child's figure burned into her mind. The next morning, a thick fog blanketed the forest, adding to the already eerie atmosphere. Determined to find a logical explanation for what she had seen, Sarah decided to delve deeper into the story of Ethan's disappearance. She drove to the small town of Klamath, just outside the forest boundaries, and visited the local library. The librarian, a kind elderly woman named Mrs. Davison, remembered the case. "It was a terrible tragedy," she said, her voice tinged with sadness. "The poor Thompson family, they never recovered." Mrs. Davison pulled out a dusty file containing newspaper clippings and police reports from the time. Sarah learned that Ethan had been at a family picnic near Redwood Creek when he wandered off. Despite extensive searches by rangers, volunteers, and even the National Guard, he was never found. The reports mentioned the dense fog that had rolled in that day, hindering the search efforts. As Sarah read through the details, a chilling realization dawned on her. The fog she had encountered last night was eerily similar to the one described in the reports. Leaving the library, Sarah felt a renewed sense of unease. The logical explanations she had sought seemed to slip further away with each new piece of information. The fog outside had thickened, wrapping the town in a ghostly embrace, mirroring the growing unease within her. Sarah's search for answers led her to a small, weathered house on the outskirts of Klamath. She had tracked down Jack Thompson, a retired park ranger who had been involved in the original search for Ethan. He was an old man now, his face etched with the lines of time and experience, but his eyes still held a sharp intelligence. He invited her in, the scent of old books and pipe tobacco filling the air. Sarah explained her experiences in the forest and her interest in Ethan's case. A shadow crossed Jack's face. "Ethan," he murmured, his voice heavy with regret. "That was a dark time. We searched for weeks, but it was like he vanished into thin air." He recounted the details of the search, the frantic parents, the relentless fog, the growing despair. Then he leaned forward, his voice dropping to a whisper. There were whispers even back then. Some of the older rangers talked about seeing a child in the woods long after the search was called off. A small figure lost and alone. He paused, his gaze fixed on some distant point in the past. "I never saw anything myself," he continued, "but I've heard stories over the years. Stories of a child's cry echoing through the redwoods, a fleeting glimpse of a small figure among the trees. It's a sad thing, a very sad thing." The weight of his words hung heavy in the air, confirming Sarah's growing suspicion that what she had seen was more than just a trick of the light. Back in her cabin, Sarah felt a growing sense of unease. The stories Jack had told her combined with her own experiences had created a palpable tension in the small space. The wind howled outside, rattling the windows and mimicking the faint cries she had heard in the forest. She tried to focus on her work, reviewing maps and reports, but her mind kept drifting back to Ethan. One evening, as she sat by the fire, a whisper seemed to brush against her ear, so faint she almost dismissed it as her imagination. But then it came again, clearer this time. "Ethan." The whisper seemed to come from just outside the window. Sarah's heart pounded. She grabbed a flashlight and cautiously opened the door, but there was nothing there, only the wind and the rustling trees. Returning inside, she noticed a small wooden toy soldier lying on the floor near the fireplace. She hadn't placed it there. A chill ran down her spine. Over the next few days, the strange occurrences intensified. She would hear her name whispered. Objects would move slightly on their own, and she found more of the old toys, a worn teddy bear, a small metal car, scattered around the cabin, always appearing in different places. One afternoon, while patrolling near Redwood Creek, she stumbled upon a small clearing overgrown with ferns and moss. A sense of familiarity washed over her. It was the same area where she had seen the child's figure. As she looked around, she noticed a small weathered headstone half hidden beneath the foliage. It was too worn to read any inscription, but its presence sent a shiver down her spine. This place felt significant. Driven by a growing sense of urgency, Sarah decided to try and find any remaining trace of Ethan's family. After some searching, through old records at the town hall, she discovered that Ethan's parents had long since passed away, but she managed to locate the address of their former home. It was a small, dilapidated farmhouse a few miles outside of Klamath, now abandoned and overgrown with weeds. The windows were boarded up, and the paint was peeling, but a sense of sadness still clung to the place. Sarah carefully pushed open the creaking front door and stepped inside. Dust motes danced in the faint light, filtering through cracks in the boarded windows. The air was thick with the smell of decay and forgotten memories. In what was once the living room, she found scattered photographs and personal belongings. A faded portrait of a young couple, presumably Ethan's parents, sat on a dusty mantelpiece. In the child's bedroom, she found more toys, a wooden train set, a well-loved stuffed dog, and a small, hand-drawn picture of a family holding hands. As Sarah held the drawing, a wave of intense sadness washed over her. She could almost feel the lingering presence of Ethan's mother, her grief echoing through the empty rooms. It was a palpable sense of loss, a mother's unending sorrow for her lost child. Sarah felt a deep connection to this place, to Ethan, and to the pain that had permeated these walls for so many years. She understood now, more than ever, that what she had encountered in the forest was not just a ghost, but a lingering echo of a profound tragedy. The image of the hand-drawn family portrait stayed with Sarah, a constant reminder of the profound loss that haunted the forest. She felt a growing compulsion to return to the clearing near Redwood Creek, the place where she had first seen the child's figure and discovered the weathered headstone. One evening, as a thick fog rolled in, mirroring the conditions of Ethan's disappearance, she decided to go. The fog was so dense that it muffled all sound, creating an eerie silence broken only by the occasional drip of moisture from the trees. As she approached the clearing, the air grew noticeably colder. The faint sound of a child's cry, which she had almost grown accustomed to, intensified, becoming a heart-wrenching sob. She pushed through the thick ferns and entered the clearing. The fog swirled around her, making it difficult to see. But then, through the swirling mist, she saw him. He stood near the base of a giant redwood, his small figure illuminated by an almost ethereal glow. It was the same child she had seen before, but this time he was clearer, more defined. He wore a faded plaid shirt and worn-out jeans, just as described in the old newspaper article. His face was pale, and his eyes were wide with fear and confusion. He looked lost, utterly lost. Tears streamed down his cheeks as he whispered, his voice barely audible above the fog, "Mommy, Daddy." Sarah's heart ached with compassion. She felt a deep connection to this lost soul, this child trapped between worlds. The fog seemed to press in on them, creating a small, isolated world within the larger forest, a world where the past and present blurred together. The cries intensified, echoing through the fog-laden trees, a desperate plea for a reunion that could never be. Sarah stood frozen for a moment, overwhelmed by the intensity of the encounter. Ethan's cries pierced the silence of the fog, each sob a testament to his enduring pain. She realized that he wasn't simply a ghost. He was trapped, reliving the moment of his disappearance, endlessly searching for his parents. A wave of empathy washed over her, stronger than anything she had ever felt. She knew she had to do something, anything, to help him. Taking a deep breath, she stepped closer, her voice soft and gentle. "Ethan," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "It's okay." He turned his head towards her, his eyes filled with confusion and a flicker of hope. "Mommy," he whispered, his voice trembling. Sarah's heart ached. She knew she couldn't pretend to be his mother, but she could offer him comfort, a connection to the world he had lost. "Your mommy and daddy, they loved you very much, Ethan," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "They searched for you everywhere. They never stopped loving you." She remembered the photograph from the abandoned farmhouse, the young couple with their bright smiles. "Your mommy had beautiful brown hair," she continued, "and your daddy had kind eyes. They missed you every single day." As she spoke, she could see a change in Ethan's expression. The fear in his eyes began to soften, replaced by a look of longing. He reached out a small, translucent hand, as if trying to touch her. They're gone?" he whispered, his voice filled with a heartbreaking sadness. Sarah nodded, gently tears welling up in her own eyes. "They are, Ethan," she said softly. "But they're waiting for you. They want you to be at peace." A soft light began to emanate from Ethan's figure, growing brighter with each word. The fog around them seemed to thin slightly, as if the veil between worlds was lifting. He looked at Sarah, a faint smile gracing his lips. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice now clear and calm. "Thank you for telling me." As Ethan spoke those words, the light surrounding him intensified, becoming a warm, gentle glow. His figure began to fade, becoming less distinct, almost transparent. The fog around them continued to dissipate, revealing the first rays of dawn. Breaking through the trees, the chilling cold that had permeated the clearing began to recede, replaced by the fresh, crisp air of the morning. Sarah watched, tears streaming down her face as Ethan's form slowly dissolved into the morning mist. The heart-wrenching cries that had echoed through the forest for so long were finally silenced. A profound sense of peace settled over the clearing, a stillness that had been absent for decades. The only sound was the gentle rustling of leaves in the morning breeze. Sarah stood there for a long time, watching as the fog completely cleared, revealing the beauty of the Redwood Forest, bathed in the golden light of the rising sun. The clearing, once a place of fear and sorrow, now felt serene, almost sacred. The weathered headstone, now fully visible, seemed less ominous, a simple marker of a life tragically cut short. The weight that had been pressing on Sarah's heart began to lift, replaced by a sense of closure, not just for Ethan, but for herself as well. The following days in the Redwood National Forest felt different. The oppressive atmosphere that had hung over the woods had lifted, replaced by a sense of tranquility. Sarah continued her work as a ranger, patrolling the trails, protecting the ancient trees, and now carrying a new understanding of the forest's history. She often visited the clearing near Redwood Creek, not with fear or sadness, but with a sense of quiet respect. The weathered headstone remained, a silent reminder of Ethan's story, but it no longer evoked the same chilling feeling. It was simply a part of the forest's history, a testament to the enduring power of memory and the possibility of finding peace even in the face of tragedy. Sarah felt a sense of connection to the land, to the spirits that had walked these woods before her, and to the cycle of life and death that played out beneath the towering redwoods. She had come to the forest seeking a new beginning, a way to escape the pain of her own loss, but she had found something more, a connection to a lost soul, a way to help him find peace, and in doing so, find a measure of peace for herself as well. The redwoods stood tall and silent, witnesses to countless stories, their legacy continuing, a testament to the enduring power of nature and the enduring strength of the human spirit.